The March issue for Empire magazine is finally out, which gives us a glimpse into Avatar: Fire and Ash, and although there isn't that much new information to uncover, there is some new tidbits that I do want to discuss. Avatar Theory here, hope you're doing well and having a fantastic day, and like I said, the March issue of Empire magazine is out right now, where Nick DeSemlian, the editor of Empire magazine, had an interview with James Cameron about, of course, Avatar: Fire and Ash. Now, prior to the release of this issue, there was two art pieces released, one showing Varang on top of this beast and one showing of the Windtraders. As mentioned in some of my previous videos, we have seen glimpses of these art pieces during D23 2024, where they officially announced the title for Avatar 3, so it was nice that we got high quality versions of these art pieces. And although the article itself is only 4 pages long, there were 2 new behind the scenes images released as well. One of them showing James Cameron with the cast wielding a bow, and you can see there Neytiri standing, or Zoe Saldana standing front and center, along with the Metkayina. And the reason I say it's the Metkayina is of course because on the left there is Alicia Bailey, stunt actress who played in the first 2 Avatar movies, and you can see on her leg it does say Reef Female, indicating of course that it is the Reef people. And on the right there with the green is Tonowari, aka Cliff Curtis. Now this scene itself is interesting because I do wonder the way Cameron is showing Neytiri how to hold the bow. I do wonder if this is a scene where Neytiri is probably or possibly teaching the Metkayina how to properly wield bows. You know, as in The Way of Water, the Reef people showed the Sullys how things worked, and maybe this time Neytiri is teaching them how to use certain weapons that they're not familiar with. So I do wonder how this will play out. The next behind the scenes image is again the master himself, James Cameron, standing over Quaritch, which seems to be kneeling on the ground. Now, I'm not too sure who are all these people in the background, but one thing that I noticed is the person on the left there, or on Quaritch's right side, if you zoom into their name tag, it says Andrew Male, but there's a white sticker with black written on it that says Ash. And with Alicia from the previous image that says Reef Female, this one says Ash Male, indicating that this is the Ash clan. You can see the weapons that they're holding is quite large, possibly some sort of spear, and based on Quaritch's expression, he's not happy, possibly being captured here, or maybe this is the first time that he's being brought to the Ash clan, to Varang, and then the Ash people is basically pushing him down. You know, you've seen it in movies before when people bring somebody to their leader, they kind of force them to kneel down in front of their leader. This is possibly what is happening there. Also, I've noticed that there's 5 people here, and if you go back to the art we received a while back where we see the Ash clan's village, you can see at the bottom there Quaritch is handcuffed, surrounded by 5 soldiers, by 5 Ash clan soldiers. So this is most certainly that scene where they eventually walk Quaritch up towards Varang and then force him down knees. And Varang, of course, being played by Una Chaplin, we've yet to see any image of her in the movie, so I'm really excited for future issues, because if you don't know, Empire will be doing a series called The Path to Pandora, where they will bring new information every single month. But speaking of other information in this issue, as I said, it is only 4 pages long, and it only includes 4 images, the 2 art pieces that we've seen and the 2 behind the scenes images. Now, as for the information itself, it is essentially a Q&A session, and while some of the questions doesn't directly relate to new information, there are a few that I want to go over. The first question is, quote, "So what shape is the film in?" Where Cameron responds, "It's in strong shape, I think. I feel really good about it, at least on a scene-by-scene basis. I haven't watched it myself from end to end in about a year. We've doubled the number of shots finished at the stage of the game than we had on movie 2, and the films are about equal length. So that puts us well ahead of the curve, which is something I've never frankly experienced before. It's always a last minute freaking nightmare on these films with a million details. It's a little bit less nightmarish. We're getting to the point where we're actually getting good at this," end quote. Now, I've already spoken about this because Empire magazine have released some snippets ahead of the article itself, and in this they of course mentioned the length. They said it's about an equal length as movie 2, so we can expect that Avatar: Fire and Ash is going to be easily a 3-hour movie. Now, the next question is certainly an interesting one, and it's about Fire and Ash being the 3rd film in a saga. Nick asks, quote, "You've set the bar in Hollywood for sequels, but this is your first 3-quel. Does it feel different?" Cameron responds, "I was involved creatively on Terminator Dark Fate, and that obviously didn't work out so well. But as director, this is my first threequel. The long play bet here is that we get people to care more about the characters than about the shock of the new. Each of the two films that people have seen already, the promise was, we're going to show you new environments, new creature, new species, and you're going to get to just inhabit a world. And we fulfilled that promise. The shift going into 3 is, yeah, there'll be plenty of new things to enjoy, but our focus really is on the characters, the through line of their story. It's a different kind of engagement with the audience. And obviously, we're betting a lot of money that it will work. End quote. Now, in case you haven't seen Terminator Dark Fate, it's not a good Terminator. It's fine, but it's not a movie that you have to watch. And it is interesting to think about that Avatar 3 will be the first threequel that Cameron directed. And it's interesting that Cameron mentioned in this article that aside from the obvious like new creatures, new environments and so on, that their focus is on the characters and the through line of their story, because Avatar 3 is going to be essentially, and from my understanding, somewhat of a conclusion of the first 3 films, but also setting up for future movies. So it's wrapping up some stories of the first 2 movies. So we've been following these characters from movie 1 to movie 2 and now to movie 3. Some of the stories are going to make sense, but also we know that Avatar 4 and 5 is set to release much later. So it'll be interesting to see how they essentially wrap up some characters in a certain way and then set up for future movies. They then speak about the title Fire and Ash, as the question is, quote, the title Fire and Ash seems to speak to an amped up emotional intensity. The Sullys were left devastated by The Way of Water's final act, where Cameron had a very interesting response to this, stating, quote, the exact quote, which is in the voiceover, is, the fire of hate gives way to the ash of grief. I think what commercial Hollywood doesn't do well is deal with grief the way human beings really deal with it. You know, characters get killed off and then in the next movie, everybody's happy again. The Sullys' journey continues in a very naturalistic, novelistic way. I've sort of thought of this next cycle, meaning 3, 4, and 5, as how they continue to process the things that happen to them. Now, of course, they're not human, but this is a movie for us, by us, right? Science fiction is always just a big mirror of the human condition, end quote. So a very interesting answer there, as I believe this is the first line that we know of the movie. We don't know any of the lines of the movie, so this is the first one, the exact one being, quote, the fire of hate gives way to the ash of grief, end quote. And I do wonder who's going to say that. Is it Jake who's going to say that? Loak who's going to say that? Varang who's going to say that? I'm not entirely sure, but it does say voiceover, so my guess is either Jake or Loak. And of course the Sullys is going to deal with the fact of losing Neytiri in The Way of Water, and that will obviously affect everything going forward. We saw in a deleted scene in The Way of Water how Neytiri lashed out in anger due to the loss of her son. So I do think that it will translate well over to Avatar Fire and Ash, and I do hope we get an epic battle between Neytiri and Varang. They then proceed to talk about the Ash clan, which excites me the most of all, where the question is asked, what else can you say about the Ash people? Cameron responds, Varang is the leader of a people who have gone through an incredible hardship. She's hardened by that. She will do anything for them, even things we would consider to be evil. One thing we wanted to do in this film is not to be black and white simplistic, or blue and pink simplistic. From the Na'vi perspective, all humans are pink. They call them pink skins, and they're not discriminating between light brown, dark brown, pink, whatever. So there's a racism element from the Na'vi's perspective that we introduce. We're trying to evolve beyond the all humans are bad, all Na'vi are good paradigm, end quote. So this has kind of been mentioned quite a while ago, since the Ash people was first mentioned, that essentially, you know, not all Na'vi is going to be good and not all humans is going to be bad. So I do wonder how this will play out if, as I've theorized before, the Ash clan will be a bigger threat than anybody thinks, even a threat for the RDA, maybe even end up being a problem for Quaritch himself. I've said before that I think there will be some sort of unlikely alliance forming in this movie, but time will tell on that one. Cameron then speaks about the Windtraders as the question is asked, quote, what other new elements of Pandora will we see? Cameron states, early on in Fire and Ash, we meet a group called the Windtrader. They're nomadic traders, equivalent to the camel caravans of the Spice Road back in the Middle Ages. And you know, they're just fun. Like all Na'vi, they live in a symbiosis with their creatures. One is the Medusoid, like a jellyfish, able to generate hydrogen gas. They're kind of giant, living soap bubbles 500 feet tall. The Windtraders have coupled them with this other creature, the Windray, which uses this kind of stingray-like sinusoidal motion to propel itself around. It's kind of like a tugboat or a tow vehicle. We show that feeling of the crew pushing off and getting the journey started, catching the wind all that stuff. If you've got any nautical blood in your veins, you'll want to be on that ship, end quote. So we do get a tease of the Windtraders. We don't know much about them yet. We don't know everything in terms of how it works, but Cameron does give us an idea of how they push off to get started, how this jellyfish creature generate hydrogen gas able to float in the air. And I expect they will be quite slow, but we don't know if they have any defense mechanisms or how they work in that sense. But based on the artwork, I'm really excited to see this on screen and just to see the beautiful imagery that was created for this movie. Then there's one more question that I want to touch on, and it is as follows. Quote, the way of water shifted focus somewhat away from the humans and the REA. Is it fair to say they'll be coming back in force? Cameron responded, oh yeah, now they're not only after unobtainium, they're after Amrita, the priceless liquid extracted from dead Tulkun, which has the power to stop human aging. Amrita is driving their economy, and General Ardmore, played by Eddie Falco, is essentially running the whole thing under military rule, in the grand tradition of the colonial era, where the military is really just corporate security writ large. We're talking about a sort of colonial era metaphor where the British and the French are using some sort of indigenous tribes as allies against other indigenous tribes. You start to see that taking place in movie 3. It's very much a colonial era, just an interstellar version of. I'm kind of a history buff, and history has this annoying tendency of repeating itself if you don't pay attention to it, end quote. Now, I have speculated before that the RDA is going to make an alliance with some sort of Na'vi tribe against another Na'vi tribe. Who they will make an alliance with is still up for discussion. Will it be a case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend? But I do see at some point Quaritch and Jake putting their differences aside just momentarily for the bigger picture. Overall, there is some information that came from these articles. There's a few more questions that was put in the article, but I don't feel that they are relevant for discussion. I recommend you check out the issue for yourself if you're curious. If you purchase the physical version, you will have the beautifully printed artwork on paper. I did do a digital subscription on the app where you get it straight away. And just knowing this information already has me excited for future issues. But what do you think about the information that was revealed in this month's issue? What are you hoping to see next month? And what alliance do you think will be formed in Avatar Fire and Ash? Let me know in the comments below, and for more Avatar content, have a look at the rest of my channel. Until next time, have a fantastic day and stay safe.